There was a time when the garage light stayed on late into the night. Now the switch hadn't been touched in years. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The tools were still there, exactly where he'd left them, hanging on the pegboard, some tilted at angles like they'd given up holding their weight. The workbench was covered in a film of dust thick enough to write in. A small wooden stool stood off to the side, one leg slightly uneven, a project he never got around to fixing. Tom hadn't opened the garage door in a long time, not since Ellen passed, not since the rhythm of his life stopped being about what needed to be built and started being about what couldn't be repaired. After that, there wasn't much point. The hammer didn't feel right in his hand anymore. The smell of sawdust didn't carry the same weight it used to. He kept the space closed, lights off, door shut. It was easier that way. Until one afternoon there was a knock at the door, not the front door, the garage. He thought maybe it was the neighbor again, asking about the leaf blower. But when he opened it, it wasn't a neighbor. It was his grandson, 8 years old, ball cap backward, sneakers untied. The boy looked up at him and said one thing, "Grandpa, can I build something with you?" Tom didn't answer right away. He just looked at the boy, really looked. He hadn't seen him more than a handful of times that year. His daughter always said they were too busy, school, work, life, the usual excuses that come with good intentions and full calendars. Now here the boy was, standing in the driveway, eyes wide, curiosity stretched across his face like he had just discovered something sacred behind that closed garage door. Tom glanced over his shoulder. The space was still dark, still quiet. Nothing had changed, but something in him moved. He stepped aside. "Sure," he said. "Come on in." The boy stepped into the garage like he was walking into a different world. His eyes darted from the pegboard to the dusty bench to the cabinets lined with jars of mismatched screws and nails. He ran his hand across a nearby shelf, came back with a fingertip covered in gray. "Whoa," he said. "This is awesome." Tom chuckled once under his breath. "Hasn't been called that in a while." The boy pointed to a hammer hanging low. "Can I use this?" Tom paused. That hammer had built more than furniture. It had built every swing set, every treehouse, every cabinet Ellen asked for. It had the kind of wear you couldn't fake, handle softened by time, metal dulled by real use. He reached for it slowly, then handed it over. "It's a little heavy," he warned. The boy gripped it with both hands and smiled. "I'll get stronger." Tom nodded once. "Let's start with something simple." He moved toward the back wall, shuffled aside a stack of scrap wood, and pulled out a few short planks. They were crooked, leftovers, but good enough. He found the old measuring tape, slid open a drawer, and grabbed a pencil. The boy watched everything. Not impatient, not distracted, just there, present. Tom hadn't realized how quiet the garage had been all those years. Not until now, when it finally wasn't. They didn't build anything that first day, just measured. Talked about wood grain and nail placement. The boy asked a dozen questions, maybe more. Tom answered them all. And when they finally stepped out into the daylight again, the boy turned back and looked at the garage one more time. "Can we keep going next week?" Tom didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said, "we can." The garage door stayed cracked open after that, just enough to let the light in. The dust looked different now that someone had walked through it. The next Tuesday, the boy came straight from school. Shoes still muddy, backpack half-zipped, hair a little wild from recess. He didn't even wait to be invited. Just walked up the driveway and knocked on the garage door like he already belonged there. Tom had been out back pulling weeds he didn't care about when he heard the knock. He didn't mind stopping. The weeds could wait. Inside, nothing had changed, and yet it felt like everything had. The boy set his backpack down in the corner and went straight to the hammer, still on the bench from last time. He picked it up and gave it a little swing, careful this time. "I practiced," he said. On what? Tom asked, already smiling. Pine cones. And one of Mom's pillows, but don't tell her. Tom laughed for real this time. A short, rough sound he hadn't heard from himself in months, maybe years. He pulled out the scrap wood from last week, added a few nails to the bench, and laid out the plan. A birdhouse, he said. Simple. We'll do it together. The boy nodded like it was a serious task. It wasn't about the birdhouse. Not really. Tom knew that. It was just a reason to be there, a reason to pick up the tools again, to wipe the dust off the bench, to put his hands back on something that wasn't a memory. They started slow. Measure, mark, cut. Tom showed him how to hold the tape measure steady, how to press the pencil lightly so you could still erase if needed. The boy didn't get it right the first time, or the second, but he listened, and that counted for more than most things. Tom showed him how to hold the saw, where to place his hand so it wouldn't slip. The boy struggled through the first cut, blade wobbling, elbow too high. That's okay, Tom said. Try again. The next one was better. By the time they had finished cutting all 4 pieces, the boy's arms were tired and Tom's back was tight. But they kept going. Nails next. The hammer felt awkward in the boy's hand, but he wanted to drive the first nail himself. It went in crooked, bent halfway through. Tom pulled it out and placed a fresh one. This time, lighter taps. Let the hammer do the work. The second nail went in straight. The boy beamed. I did it. Tom looked at him, then at the nail, then back. Yeah, he said, you did. They finished the rest together, side by side at the bench, one holding the wood steady while the other drove the nails. The roof was slightly off-center. One side hung lower than the other. It didn't sit perfectly flat, but it stood. And when it was done, the boy stepped back and just stared at it. Tom did too. It's kind of wobbly, the boy said. Tom nodded. That's all right. First things usually are. They didn't paint it, didn't sand it, just left it as it was, plain, honest, a little uneven. But theirs. Before the boy left, he looked around the garage one more time. What are all those for? He asked, pointing to the pegboard full of tools. Tom followed his finger, looked at the rows of wrenches, pliers, clamps, screwdrivers. They used to be for everything, he said. The boy didn't ask what that meant, just said, I want to learn all of them. Tom paused. You will, he said. He stood in the doorway long after the boy had gone. The birdhouse sat on the bench. Tools scattered, sawdust on the floor. It wasn't clean, it wasn't quiet, but it felt like something was being built again. The birdhouse leaned a little to the left, but no one seemed to care. It sat on the windowsill in Tom's kitchen now. Not out in the yard, not on a tree branch where it was meant to be. He never said why. The boy didn't ask. But every morning when Tom made his coffee, he looked at it, just sat there and looked. The edges were uneven. A nail stuck out near the roof, and the base was 1 inch too short, but it was theirs. The next Saturday, the boys showed up again. Same time, same sneakers, this time with a juice box in one hand and a notebook in the other. He walked through the garage like he had keys to it. No knocking, no hesitation. What are we building today? He asked. Tom was already at the bench, sorting through screws. We? The boy grinned. Come on, you can't stop now. Tom let the joke sit for a second, then handed him a screwdriver. Something small, he said. Drawer organizers. This place is a mess. The boy flipped open the notebook. Pages full of scribbles. Boxes, arrows, shapes. None of it made much sense, but it was filled with ideas. This is a plan for a secret compartment, he said, pointing to one of the drawings, like for treasure. Tom raised an eyebrow. You got treasure? Not yet, but I'm planning ahead. They spent the morning building a simple divider for one of the old drawers on the workbench. Just 4 little pieces of pine, cut to size, nothing fancy. The boy insisted on measuring everything himself this time. Tom watched, correcting only when it really mattered. The cuts were straighter now, the hammer swings more confident. He was learning without knowing it. They stopped once for lunch, sandwiches in the backyard, toolbox still open, wood shavings on their sleeves. The garage door stayed open. Sunlight crept in along the floor. A breeze carried in the smell of sawdust and oil. After lunch, the boy pulled out a small tin from his backpack. "These were Grandma's," he said. Tom looked down. Sewing pins, buttons, an old measuring tape with a crack in the middle. "Mom said I could keep them, but I think they should go in here." He placed the tin inside the drawer they just fixed. Tom didn't speak, just slid the drawer shut carefully. They went back to work. By the end of the afternoon, they cleared off half the bench, threw out what couldn't be saved, sorted the rest. Tools went back on the wall. The hammer got a new hook. The old level, the one Tom hadn't used since the porch swing, was dusted and hung with care. "Feels like a real workshop now," the boy said. Tom nodded. "It's getting there." As the boy packed up to leave, he paused at the door. "You think we could build a little shelf next time for Grandma's tin?" Tom looked up from the bench. "Yeah," he said. "We could do that." After the boy left, Tom stayed in the garage. He didn't turn off the light right away. Instead, he stood in front of the pegboard, looked at the tools, the clean drawer, the empty space where the next project would go. He ran his hand across the bench. Rough wood, familiar, still solid. Then he reached for the tin drawer, opened it again. The sewing pins were still inside. So were the buttons. But now, next to them, he placed a small, folded napkin. It wasn't much, but it was his. Saturday mornings used to pass without much meaning. Now they had a place to be. The boy was there before 9, backpack over one shoulder, a granola bar sticking out of the side pocket. Tom heard him coming up the driveway before he even looked. Sneakers on gravel, a familiar knock, 2 taps, then the door creaked open like it already knew who was there. "You ready?" the boy asked, stepping inside without waiting. Tom nodded. "You bring the plans?" The boy held up the same notebook, now bent at the corners and smudged with pencil marks. "Upgraded," he said. "This time, it's got measurements." They were building the shelf, not a big one, just something small enough to hold the tin and maybe a couple of other things. The boy had drawn it 3 different ways. Tom picked the simplest. "Keep it square," he said. "Simple lasts longer." They got to work. The morning moved with a rhythm now, unspoken, easy. They measured first, laid the boards out on the bench, marked the cuts. The boy held the saw more comfortably this time. Steady grip, elbow down. Tom guided when needed, but mostly let him do it. Every now and then the blade caught and jumped, and the boy would frown, reset, and keep going. He didn't get frustrated like he used to. He didn't expect it to be perfect. Tom noticed that. When the pieces were ready, they clamped them down, glued the joints, and let it set. While they waited, Tom showed him how to countersink screws, not because the shelf needed it, but because it was something to learn. "You hide the screw under the surface," he explained. "Makes it look clean." "Like a secret screw?" the boy asked. Tom nodded. "Exactly." They took their time with the finish, sanded the edges smooth, wiped the dust with an old rag Tom kept from years back, the one Ellen used to hand him when he worked outside. The boy didn't know that. He just liked the soft fabric. "Feels like a real shop rag," he said. Tom smiled. "It is." They mounted the shelf on the side wall, just beside the window. It wasn't level on the first try. The boy noticed before Tom said anything. "Left side's low," he said. "Let's fix it." They did, slowly, together. When the tin sat on the shelf, it looked like it had always belonged there. The boy stepped back, arms crossed, mimicking Tom's usual stance. "It's good," he said. "Not too fancy." "Fancy doesn't hold up," Tom said. The rest of the afternoon was quiet. They cleaned up, put the tools back, swept the floor. The boy asked about the big clamps in the back, the ones Tom hadn't touched in years. He explained they were for glue-ups, longboards, tables, anything that needed time and pressure. We gonna use them someday? The boy asked. Tom didn't answer right away. Maybe. Later, as they sat on the back step drinking lemonade out of old mason jars, the boy spoke again. Did you build things with my mom? Tom looked out across the yard. Yeah, he said. Not as much as this. She liked painting more, but we built a toy box once. She painted the lid with stars. The boy nodded like he was storing that somewhere. I like this, he said, us building stuff. Tom took a slow sip. Me too. The sun dropped a little lower. The light shifted across the yard. In the garage, the shelf caught it just right. Warm light on old tools, dust floating in the air. Nothing flashy, nothing big. But it was steady, and sometimes that was more than enough. The drawer hadn't been opened in years, but now it was the first thing the boy went to. He slid it open carefully, like he was checking to make sure it was all still there. The tin, the folded napkin, a few new things they had added, a key that didn't belong to anything, a broken watch Tom said he'd fix one day, two short pencils worn to the nub. The boy pulled out the tin and gave it a little shake. Still full, he said. Tom nodded from across the workbench. Good. It was early, not even 9 yet. The garage door was half open, letting in a square of light that spilled across the floor. Outside, the trees were quiet. No wind, no cars, just the slow morning air. They didn't have a project plan. Sometimes they didn't need one. Tom had started clearing out one drawer at a time. Not for spring cleaning, not for any real reason. Just something to do while the boy explored. There were still old screws scattered in the corners, jars with mismatched nails, washers, bolts. He didn't throw much out. He just made room. The boy came over with a pair of pliers. What's this for? Tom took it, held it up. That one's for pulling nails. The boy pointed to another pair in the drawer. And those? Same thing, just older. Bad handle. Why do you still keep them? Tom looked at the cracked grip, the worn-out hinge. Sometimes it's good to have a backup. The boy didn't ask more, just nodded. He moved to the next drawer, pulled out a wooden ruler with faded numbers, ran his thumb along the edge. This was Grandma's, Tom said quietly. The boy paused. Did she build stuff too? Tom leaned against the bench. Not the same way, but she measured everything. Wouldn't let me hang a single picture without checking it twice. The boy smiled. Sounds like Mom. She gets it honest. They worked like that for most of the morning. Drawer by drawer, tool by tool. No rush, no checklist, just questions. What's this called? What does this do? Why are there so many screwdrivers? Tom answered every one, some short, some with a story attached. Like the chisel with the chipped edge, used it to carve their initials into the deck one summer. Or the wrench missing the rubber grip, left it on the hood of the truck one afternoon, found it again a week later in the rain. It still works, he said, holding it up. Just not as pretty. At one point, the boy pulled out a small wooden block with a smoothed-over corner. What's this from? Tom took it, turned it over in his hand. That was the leg from the first bench I ever made. The boy looked up. This bench? No, Tom said. That one fell apart years ago, but I saved the piece. Why? Tom didn't answer right away. He rubbed the edge of the wood with his thumb. Because it's good to remember where you started. The boy thought about that, then placed the block carefully in the cleaned-out drawer, right beside the tin. They didn't build anything that day, but when they swept the garage floor and closed up for the afternoon, something had shifted. The drawers weren't just organized. They were lived in again. And as the boy packed up his notebook and tied his shoelaces, he looked back at the wall of tools. I want to learn the names of all of them, he said. Tom looked at him, then at the tools. You will. He reached over and handed the boy the old tape measure. Start with this. The chair had been broken for 3 years, maybe longer, but now it mattered. It sat in the corner of the garage near the extra paint cans, half covered by an old tarp. One leg was loose, the back tilted, and the seat had a hairline crack that looked ready to give way with one more wrong shift of weight. Tom had planned to fix it once back when Ellen was still around. She used to say it squeaked like it had something to say. After she passed, it just became part of the clutter. Until the boys saw it. They just finished sanding a shelf bracket when he wandered to the corner and tugged back the tarp. "This one's broken," he said. Tom looked over. "Yeah, I know. You gonna fix it?" Tom paused. "Wasn't planning to." The boy sat down gently, testing it. The back wobbled. The seat groaned. "I like it," he said. "Feels like it's got a story." Tom wiped his hands on an old rag. "It does." He didn't say more, but that was enough. The next week, they pulled the chair onto the center of the workbench. The boy stood on a milk crate to get a better angle. Tom laid out the tools, a clamp, wood glue, a replacement dowel, and a few screws they might not need but had just in case. The boy traced the crack in the seat with his finger. "How do we fix this part?" Tom showed him how to drill a pocket hole, how to clamp the leg while the glue dried. The boy held the light, asked why the screw had to be that length, asked what would happen if it wasn't, asked why the wood made that sound when the clamp got tight. Tom answered each question like it deserved to be asked. When the leg was secure, the boy tightened the last screw and stepped back. "I think it's better now," he said. "It is," Tom said. The chair didn't look new. The seat still leaned slightly. The finish was uneven from years of sun, but it was solid again. The next day, Tom placed it by the small window in the garage. Didn't say why, just did. That same week, the neighbor from across the street walked over with a wobbly stool. "You're fixing stuff again?" she asked. Tom looked at the stool, wobbled it gently. "Guess I am," she smiled. "It's been sitting in my kitchen like that for months." Tom looked at the boy. The boy looked at the stool. "We can fix it," he said. The neighbor left it there. A few days later, someone else stopped by. A drawer that stuck, then a mailbox hinge. It wasn't every day, just once in a while. Quiet knocks on the side door. People who remembered what it used to mean when the light was on in the garage. Tom didn't advertise. He didn't ask for payment. He just worked. Steady hands, measured movements. The boy helped when he could, holding screws, marking lines, clamping corners. They fixed what came in, nothing fancy, just things that needed another chance. At one point, the boy looked up from sanding a cabinet door. "Why are people bringing us stuff?" Tom didn't look up, just kept sanding. "Because word gets around." The boy thought about that. "About you?" Tom smiled slightly. "About this place." That night, when they closed up, the boy reached for the light switch but paused. "Do you think Grandma would have liked it?" he asked. Tom stood still for a second, hand resting on the back of the newly fixed chair. "She would have loved it." And he meant it. The bench didn't sit straight, but Tom sat on it every day anyway. It was the boy's idea. He said he wanted to build something himself, start to finish, no help. Tom didn't argue, just handed him a pencil and stood back. The boy spent the first hour drawing it out on his notebook, tongue between his teeth, checking and rechecking his lines. His measurements were off by half an inch in two places. He didn't notice, and Tom didn't correct him. "You sure you want to build a bench?" Tom asked. "It's harder than it looks." The boy nodded. "I want it to be something you can sit on." That was enough. They pulled wood from the stack behind the garage. Nothing fancy. Leftover pine boards from a project that never got finished. Some were slightly warped. Some had knots. But the boy didn't mind. He ran his hands over them like they were treasure. Tom set up the saw. "I'll do the cuts, but you measure." The boy nodded, took his time, marked each board with care. When they started assembling, the boy held the drill like it was made of glass. His arms shook a little. Screws went in crooked. One split the wood near the edge. He frowned but didn't stop. Tom passed him another board. Try again. This one's stronger. They worked like that all afternoon. By the end, the bench stood. It wobbled slightly when they first tested it. The legs weren't perfectly square. One end of the seat dipped down a little, but it held. Tom sat on it slowly, hands on either side, weight balanced like he was testing a bridge. The boy stood across from him, waiting for a verdict. Tom didn't say anything. He just sat back, stretched his legs out, and let out a long, quiet breath. It's good, he said. The boy grinned. Really? Tom looked down at the bench, then back up. Really? The boy ran inside, came back with a screwdriver and a carving tool he'd gotten in a craft kit last Christmas. He knelt beside the bench and carved 4 words into the front edge. For Grandpa, built by me. The letters were crooked, some deeper than others. The G in Grandpa was too close to the edge and curled up at the bottom, but Tom couldn't take his eyes off it. He didn't say anything right away, just ran his fingers over the rough letters, then nodded once. Thank you. The boy sat beside him, legs swinging. They didn't talk for a while, just watched the trees sway in the backyard and listened to the soft sound of wind moving through leaves. That evening, Tom moved the bench to the side of the garage, just beneath the window. It stayed there from then on. Every afternoon he sat on it, sometimes with the boy, sometimes with a cup of coffee, and no one else. People in the neighborhood started noticing. One woman passed by while walking her dog and pointed at the bench. Nice spot you've got there. Tom nodded. Best seat in the place. Another neighbor brought over a basket of lemons from her tree and left them on the bench without knocking. The boy found them the next morning and said, That means people like it. Tom smiled. Means they respect it. Later that week, the boy found Tom sitting on the bench alone, hands folded, looking straight ahead. You okay? Tom nodded. Just thinking. About what? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, It's been a long time since I have had something made for me. The boy sat beside him. You've made a lot for other people. Tom looked at the words carved into the bench, then at the boy. So have you. The power went out just before dinner, but the garage stayed lit. A summer storm had rolled in fast. Thick clouds, heavy wind, lightning that cracked the sky open just long enough to see the street flash white. The lights flickered twice, then cut out for good. The house went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator winding down and the low, huh, from the boy as he looked up from his book. Tom was already checking the fuse box before the rest of the family had grabbed flashlights. He knew it wasn't just them. He could see porch lights out up and down the block. The boy followed him outside, hoodie pulled over his head, sneakers already soaked from the wet grass. What do we do now? The boy asked. Tom looked at the sky, then at the garage. We work. The garage didn't have power either, but it didn't need it, not now. Tom pulled the door open and grabbed 2 battery lanterns from the shelf. One of them still worked. The other flickered, then held steady. He placed them on the workbench and turned them so the light spread wide across the tools and drawers. The boy stood at the doorway, surprised. We can still work in here? Tom nodded. Always could. The storm rumbled in the background. Rain hit the roof in slow, steady taps. They didn't have a project plan, but that didn't matter. They pulled out the stool they'd been meaning to repair and placed it in the center of the room. The boy wiped it down with an old rag while Tom sorted through the screws. Neighbors started walking by with questions. First, the woman from down the street whose kitchen drawer wouldn't close right. Then a man with a porch light fixture that had fallen in the wind. They weren't looking for electricity. They were looking for something steady. Something that worked when the rest didn't. Tom nodded, took the drawer first, set it on the bench. The boy watched closely, asking about the track, about the difference between flathead and Phillips screws, about why old drawers always seem to stick. Because they get tired, Tom said, just like people. They fixed the drawer, handed it back, moved to the next job. Someone else brought over a cracked flashlight. Tom didn't fix electronics, but the boy said, Can we try? So they tried, didn't work. but they learned something. For the next hour, the garage stayed busy. The bench stayed warm. The storm passed. The power didn't come back right away, but no one seemed to mind. One neighbor brought sandwiches. Another brought a thermos of coffee. The boy made space on the shelf for all of it. Tom just kept working. The lanterns buzzed faintly. The floor was scattered with screws, wood chips, old nails, and wet footprints. It didn't look like much, but it felt like something. When the lights finally came back on just before 10, there was a brief cheer from somewhere down the block. Porch lights returned. Air conditioners kicked back in. Inside the house, the TV blinked to life again. Tom didn't move, neither did the boy. They just looked at the warm yellow light overhead, then at the garage walls lined with tools and history. "I kind of liked it better with the lantern," the boy said. Tom nodded. "Me too." The neighbors left slowly, one by one, carrying drawers, stools, and small things fixed just enough to hold on a little longer. Tom shut the garage door halfway, left the lantern on the bench. That night, the boy sat on the bench outside, feet swinging, quiet. Tom joined him. They didn't say much, didn't need to. The lights were back on, but they both knew something else had been restored too. The tools weren't put away anymore. They stayed out like they belonged there. Years had passed. The boy was taller now, his hands steadier. He didn't need help lining up the saw anymore. Didn't flinch when the drill caught rough. He knew where the clamps were, reached for the right bit without asking, and put his own pencil behind his ear out of habit. The garage looked different too. Not cleaner, just more lived in. The kind of space where things happened. Wood dust always on the floor, tape measures never where you left them, pencils disappearing like they had somewhere else to be. The bench had been sanded down twice. One leg had been replaced last fall. The pegboard on the back wall had new hooks, added one day when the boy said, "We need a spot for these now." They never stopped calling it the garage. But everyone in the neighborhood knew it was something more. People still dropped things off. Hinges, loose chairs, squeaky drawers. Sometimes it was just to talk. Tom always made space, sometimes at the bench, sometimes on the carved-up old stool near the side wall. Most of the time, the boy stayed close, listening without saying much. Tom's hands weren't what they used to be. Some mornings they moved slower. Some days he skipped the finer work, let the boy take over the sanding, the gluing, the measuring. But he still showed up, still laid out the tools, still sharpened the blades that needed it and tossed the screws that bent too early. One Saturday, the boy stood in the middle of the garage and said, "I think I want to build a cabinet." Tom looked up from the bench. "For what?" "For the future." Tom didn't laugh, didn't smile, just nodded once. "Then let's do it right." They built it over 3 weekends. Tall, simple, heavy, every joint lined up, every drawer ran smooth. The handles were carved from a piece of oak Tom had been saving for something that mattered. They didn't say what the cabinet would hold. They didn't have to. When it was done, they placed it in the back corner, filled the top shelf with the things they always reached for first, the middle with scraps they never threw out, the bottom drawer stayed empty. "Just in case," the boy said. Tom liked that. By then, the boy wasn't really a boy anymore. He was starting to talk about college, about welding, about maybe carpentry school. Tom never pushed, just listened. Said things like, "You've got the hands for it, and just make sure whatever you build, you stand by it." One night, Tom stayed out in the garage after the boy had gone. He sat on the bench with the carved words, "For Grandpa, built by me." Ran his fingers over the letters, worn smooth from years of work and weather. He didn't think about what he'd built in his life. He thought about what had been built here. The next morning, he didn't open the garage. That was the day the boy came to find the door already cracked, but no tools laid out. The workbench was clean. A note sat in the center, folded once, his name written on the outside. Inside, in his grandfather's handwriting, "Keep going, not just with wood, with people. They're what lasts." The boy sat down on the bench, looked around at the tools, the cabinet, the dust on the floor, then stood up, tied on the apron that still hung by the window, and picked up the hammer.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.